What's up, Zach here, and today I've got the 41st edition of the Nike Pegasus. Let's get into it. Now, the Pegasus 41 is one of the most comfortable running shoes I've had on in the Pegasus line and just in general this year. That does come with a few drawbacks, how they achieve that feeling of plushness, but we'll get into that soon. Getting into the uppers, though, really forgiving. Honestly, just a real pleasure to put on. Honestly, the tongue on these things, nice and thick, especially where the laces will cross, especially if you're using a runner's knot or doing a Canadian lace on these. Really zero irritation on my laces, even with my super high arched foot. Now, this is an integrated lace line. That's why the laces lay down so well. On the Nike, some of the Pegasus line, the Vapor line, they'll have these integrated lace eyelets, and yeah, they do get a more broad lockdown, but it also lays them more flat on your foot. So the lockdown is a little more efficient and you don't have to crank them right over your dorsal cutaneous nerves, those sensory nerves on the top of your foot that can cause those feelings of cramping, pins and needles, numbness, things like that. Now, as you go into the forefoot, you see you have what looks like pretty open mesh. And if you look at the breathability mapping on these, the fog is blowing out of everywhere on the shoe. It's funny because a lot of shoes, the only place fog gets out is the tongue, whereas on these ones, that's really where the fog wasn't getting out as much. It was really getting out in the forefoot, which is great because it means there's a lot of egress there from moisture. The thing is, they still heated up 105.3 degrees, which is not bad by any means. But compared to some of their cousins in the Nike family, it is just a tad more heating than those shoes are, although they're still very breathable. The thing I noticed is yeah, you do get a very aggressive mesh gusset here on the tongue, but it is thick. Like that material on the inside of the shoe, that's got some padding and thickness to it. Then on the outside, you get those real macro pore channels on the outside. And then obviously that integrated lace line goes into the strobe board that is pretty thick too. So there actually is more padding in this shoe than you think it's going to have, especially from the outside. There's layers to that mesh. So sometimes it's going to take a little while for that air to find its way out of there. Like I said, still very breathable shoes. It's not the Vaporfly or the Alphafly though. As you go into the rear foot, not a ton of bunting and padding around the heel counter. That does help keep a little bit of the weight down, but that does entail some heel slippage. I noticed even with breaking on these, heel slippage was, it was moderate. You still were kind of, popping out of the shoe. Even after breaking and even with the runner's knot, I still was getting some slippage in there. Now, if you look at this on the upper durability test though, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, yeah, I mean, the burr works right through this. These obviously are not meant to be going through brush, right? You can get the Pegasus Trail Gore-Tex for that if you want. But in terms of blunt containment side to side, because there's so many layers on these shoes, because of the lockdown, because you get the runner's knot back there, like I said, side to side blunt containment, at least in the midfoot and the forefoot of the shoe is pretty good. In the rear foot, like I said, even though the ankle collar is pretty high, I did notice that I was having just a little bit of play in there. And getting into the midsole teardown, I was wondering because I had taken an x-ray of these shoes and did not see a shank on them, and lo and behold, there is none. You do get a rear foot top-loaded Zoom Air unit as well as a forefoot, and then you also get an entire bed of React X foam. That's that EVA plus TPE, that's the injection molded foam. It is just one of the softest, most comfortable foams out there. And honestly, it does have a lot of spring back, right, when it is brand new. It's just that there's no shank in there. So if you're a heavier runner, especially if you're a midfoot striker more, you got a real, hardy midfoot strike, more of a marching gait, this is going to start to compress pretty good, right? The Zoom Air units, because it's tensile air, it does protect the midsole more than just a straight slab of foam would. But like I said, with that creasing and everything, you can see I just, curl the shoe as much as I want. You are going to get a little bit less durability, but like I said, that's why they feel so pillowy. That's why they feel so comfortable. That React X is just amazing in terms of comfort, especially, more for casual wear too, which we'll get to in the runability and in the performance section. Now, if you look at this on the bounce height test, 35 centimeters in the heel, shocker, 35 in the forefoot. Incredibly consistent shoe, number one, because it's top-loaded Zoom Air on both, and because React X, actually, and React Foam, it's more of a shock-absorbing foam. I know when you kind of bend it, it wants to snap back, but in terms of shock absorption, right, like if we're coming down on it, right, axially, these do have a little bit more of a shock absorbing capability. Yeah, when you're coming down, loading a shoe, going through more of a full gait cycle, they do have a little bit of snap. But like I said, that's gonna wear down as the foam wears down. So I would say these are more, to me, more of shock absorbing shoes, very lightweight feeling shock absorbing shoes. A lot of times when you, especially in the running space, I'm sure a lot of you know, when you get a shoe with a lot of shock absorption, a lot of forgiveness, a lot of times it can be a little bit more of a clunker as well. These definitely are not. So, like I said, they're lightweight feeling in the midsole, and like I said, they have enough pop to them. But to me, especially running in them, they definitely felt a little bit more forgiving than they did snappy. And getting into the outsole tread, this is a near full-length checkerboard pattern with, the jutted out, more square type treads, those little plugs, and then you've got more that flat rubber underneath of them. Now, the durometer on this comes in at a 13.5, but on the outsole durability test on these things, 10-second tires grit sandpaper, I mean, about 1 millimeter of damage on these. The thing is we've seen with some of these Nike shoes that have this contract, and some other shoes too, that it's incredibly durable, right, as long as you don't have a shuffling gait, just because there's so much tread to share that load, right, to share the friction and all those shear forces that come down, especially if you kind of have a little bit of a twist at the end of your gait. So honestly, a little bit more on the durable end in terms of outsole rubbers for shoes, especially if a little bit more of a tuned gait, right, you're more of an elite runner versus some of us that shear all over the place. If you look at it on the grip test ramp, shocker, slips at 40 degrees. I swear these running companies, they all got together and they said, it's either going to be 38, 40, or 43 degrees, because that's when all of them slip pretty much right in the same categories, all the rest of them. Enough traction for a little bit more of a slicker pavement, but not so much that you're sticking to the ground. I notice when I'm looking at them on the viewing box too, that they do just kind of roll very easily off the ground. Like I said, even on a pretty hot day, which was a couple of days I was running on them were pretty darn hot. Really no sticking to the ground, right? The durometer is just hard enough where it does not want to do that. Now, if you look at these things on the speed ratio, coming in at 3.17, which is pretty good, except there's no shank, so shank score of 0, so there's no bump from that shank. I think when they're new, that's pretty much in the range where they belong. Obviously there's a lot of other shoes out there that are getting up into the 6 range on the speed ratio on these. I think that these definitely belong more in that 50-50 shock absorbing and speed kind of category on these. Like I said, especially if you're a heavier runner or when these shoes start getting, up in mileage, these are definitely some of them where, that 500-mile rule, I think, is pretty much a hard rule on these. And getting into the fit of the Pegasus 41, very pleasantly surprised. These things only have an 8-degree inflare on them, which honestly is pretty mellowed out for a shoe, that's capable of what this thing's capable of. They do have a 9.3 centimeter metatarsal width and a 10.4 centimeter digital parabola width, or toe box width. They only inflare 28 degrees, which is actually less inflare than some court shoes out there, which I thought was pretty interesting, that they're a little bit more forgiving in the forefoot. Now remember, less of the taper, less of the inflare is going to feel a little bit, maybe a little bit more clunky on foot, but it also is a little bit more forgiving. Whereas in these, like I said, because the shoe otherwise is so streamlined, so easy to get around, it really doesn't matter. You can kind of get away with a little bit more of a forgiving, metatarsal to toe box width and, and taper. Now in terms of narrow and medium foot, I think you just go true to size. A 2E though, because the uppers are so malleable, they're so forgiving, I think you break these in true to size and you won't get, deal with those heel slip issues. In the women's sizing, I have seen these in a wide, in the men's, at least I didn't see them for sale yet, or they were out of stock by the time I actually got around to buying these. But if you can get these in the wide, a 4E, I'd just go true to size in the wide fit, because if you're a 4E and you're trying to go up, you're gonna introduce some heel slipping into these. So 4E, I might try to break these in 1/2 size up. It might be a little bit of a longer break-in, but it would at least help, prevent the heel slippage and you having to do arts and crafts around the ankle collar and the heel counter of the shoe. Now, in terms of the snake bitten foot, while these things are new, they are so forgiving. Oh my gosh. But as they get a little older, honestly, I think these have the potential for a negative heel. They, have a little bit of potential for arch strain for sure. And because really you can only fit in a very, very razor thin orthotic in these, they're not great for orthotics either. So I would say somebody with a lot of snake bites on their foot, I would try to go for more of a shoe that has a better lockdown on it, to be honest, and a shoe which is maybe a little bit more support in the midfoot in general. Like I said, while they're new, and if you're looking for just a casual shoe that you're maybe to keep a little bit more new, then yeah, they're great. Honestly, I felt fantastic, especially shock going up my leg with my jumper's knee right now. I really didn't feel anything in these, in those initial, handful of runs in them. So like I said, while they're new, they're fantastic, except for arch strain. They still do want to pronate a little bit. But in terms of, just lumps, bumps, bruises, they're all right. But overall, that they're much more for a runner that is not battling a lot of snake bites. And in terms of the runability of these things or performance, honestly, I mean, they're great for heel strikers, midfoot strikers, forefoot strikers while they are new. They're so forgiving across gait styles, right? And because the React X is, like I said, it's so nice and snappy when you're actually loading it, then you're actually putting a bend in it. That diving board effect of the React X alone is really phenomenal. It's just like I said, if you're a heavier runner, it's going to break down. If you're a lighter runner, light on your feet, stay a little bit more of a pretty tuned forefoot striking gait, I think that is a little bit less of a problem, and I think these do a lot better on the long run. If you're someone with a really heavy, more marching type gait, more of a midfoot striking gait, or if you're someone that's, reaching with their heels, those longer strides, those more energy intensive strides are going to break this shoe down a little bit more. I honestly thought these were one of the better casual kick around shoes, more recovery shoes out there. So much so that my wife actually bought a pair after I was in these for a while. She actually ended up buying a pair for some of our summer trips we're taking. So, I mean, that just shows you in terms of more casual wear, at least walking around, things like this, kind of kick around shoes. They are fantastic. And like I said, for a lighter runner, a little bit more of an effortless gait, right? You're not, pounding the ground as much as someone like me would who's lumbering on the ground. I think these much more get you up to that 500-mile mark with a little bit more ease versus someone like me where I might be looking for something else, a little bit more support after maybe a little bit more abbreviated period in these. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Pegasus 41 in the comments down below, especially because we've gotten it's been a while for this line. It's pretty interesting to see the evolution of it. And if you do want to see another shoe that does feature React X in it, the Nike Infinity Run going to the knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect, rubber, and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.